Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 221B Baker Street, the famous home of the great detective, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Now, before we start, I do have to remind you that many of the objects in this room and the next room are genuine Victorian antiques, so please don't touch anything. With that out of the way, let me take you back in time, all the way to the era of Sherlock Holmes himself. I want you to imagine yourselves coming up those stairs there, only to find the man seated here, in this, Sherlock's favourite chair. Why was it Sherlock's favourite chair? Well, I'll tell you. Because if he was sitting in this chair, you'd have to sit here, in this chair, meaning this large window with all of that natural light coming through would illuminate your face, allowing him to analyse your expressions and your intentions. But if he wasn't analysing people's facial expressions, he was analysing one substance or chemical or another here, at his world-famous chemistry set. It was at this very set that he pioneered a number of modern scientific practices, often using them to solve cases before the Metropolitan Police even had that technology. Now, I don't want you to think that Sherlock was just a man of science, though. Oh no. He was also a creative musical soul, as evidenced by the violin, lovingly kept here. The violin was often Sherlock's go-to whenever he found a case particularly difficult, or if he found his life particularly boring when no cases were available. It was one of the few things that seemed to soothe his troubled soul. It's interesting that he had that love of music, though, because the only person to ever best the great detective in a battle of wits was herself, an opera singer. Does anyone know who I'm referring to? Here she is. Miss Irene Adler from A Scandal in Bohemia, yes. But just as we have a spot for Sherlock's greatest rival, we have a place over here for Sherlock's greatest and closest friend. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the desk of Dr. Watson. Here we have Dr. John Watson's medical bag, the one he used all of his life. And on the table there, very touching indeed, a newspaper, The Times, dated from the day that Sherlock and Watson first moved in together. Now, on top of that, we have a number of items from Dr. Watson's career in the British Army. The Africanized lion from his time in Africa. The 2 Indian elephants from his time in India. And this nasty device is something that was used in Victorian times to cure toothache. A small electrical shock would be sent into the gum, removing the pain. Unfortunately, it was removed from use when people discovered that it actually killed off the nerve endings inside the gum. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to join me here in this room, we'll continue our exploration of Sherlock's life and work. Please come over. Please come outside, sir. Anywhere you like. Come all the way in. Let's make space, make sure there's space for everyone. Fantastic. Okay, everybody. When you come into this room, you can't help but notice all of these pictures along the wall here. And it would be easy to think that these people must be Sherlock's friends or family. After all, this is his bedroom. But although he called them my dear old friends, they were not his friends, nor were they people you'd ever want to be friends with. These portraits are of the worst serial killers and murderers of the Victorian era. Here we have Lizzie Borden, the alleged axe murderer from Massachusetts, the infamous Dr. Crippen. And can anyone tell me who this man is? Dr. Thomas Neil Cream. Does anybody know?
Moriarty? Moriarty?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Moriarty was different. Good guess, nonetheless.
You get there.
Dr. Thomas Neil Cream was the Lambeth poisoner, a doctor who poisoned several of his patients in the late 1800s. But that's not why he's remembered, and that's not why he's on this wall. He's on this wall because on the day of his execution, with the rope around his neck and the trapdoor about to fall, he uttered the words, "I am Jack." People took that to mean that he was Jack the Ripper. But he wasn't. He wasn't.
It was Jack.
He wasn't even that. But a brief investigation showed that during at least 2 of the Ripper killings, Thomas Neil Cream was actually in prison in Chicago, so he couldn't have been the culprit. But if we look at what he's wearing in this picture, the top hat, the long black cloak, these items of clothing are still associated with the Ripper legend today. So whilst he didn't prove himself to be the Ripper, he left his mark on the legend anyway. But back to Sherlock. We find here the great detective's makeup kit. He was a master of disguise, and he would use this to alter the features of his face. He would often surprise Dr. Watson by changing his appearance before the doctor came home from work, often in giving him something of a fright when he thought a stranger was in his apartment. On the mantelpiece there, you'll find the Persian slipper. That's where Sherlock used to stuff his tobacco, in the toe. A habit that infuriated Dr. Watson, who was a man of health and hygiene and found it absolutely disgusting. If you turn around, ladies and gentlemen, on Sherlock's bed, you'll find the police kit, complete with truncheon, and the priest's hat from the Scandal in Bohemia case. Next to that, most importantly of all, I think, in a special preservation case, we have Sherlock's deerstalker. Now, although the deerstalker is now synonymous with Sherlock, he wouldn't have worn it very often, because the deerstalker is a hat to only be worn in the countryside. People don't tend to wear it in the city, and you'd look rather silly even then if you did. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, you can make your way to the second floor, to Dr. Watson's room, and Mrs. Hudson's room. Thank you very much. Thank you.